we're back once again to talk about Stenzek and the Duckstation project. So if you don't know, Duckstation is a PlayStation 1 emulator and is generally regarded as the best option out there. Now, for anyone who doesn't know, for anyone who's out of the loop, about 6 months ago, Duckstation author now actively blocking Arch Linux builds. Adding this change here, which is checking if it is being built on an Arch Linux environment, and also going and removing the package build that was being provided that wasn't the one being used on the AUR, but is the one that he wanted people on the AUR to be using. I originally provided this as an alternative to the broken AUR packages. However, it seems the Arch users would rather use broken packages and keep complaining to me instead of their packager. I specifically forbid packages for Duckstation, see the README, and there's no way to request the removal of these packages without handing my details over to a distribution I want nothing to do with. Basically, you would just make an account and then say, hey, remove this, and then they basically decide if they want to or they don't, and they decided, well, they're not going to. So this is step 1. Next step will be removing Linux support entirely, because I'm sick of the headaches and hacks for an operating system that only comprises 2% of the user base, and I don't even use it myself. But I'm hoping the Linux community will be reasonable, because as someone giving up my free time and not being compensated in any way, I shouldn't have to deal with this. Just grep the source for Wayland, and you'll see what I mean. This change effectively resulted in kinda sorta breaking the AUR build of Duckstation. Not for very long though, because it's a very simple change, and doesn't actually affect the rest of the codebase, so they just patched it out, unbroke the build, and yeah, we're basically good to go after that. Now, the reason why this was done is basically users of the AUR package would have issues with the AUR package, and then rather than go to the packager of the application on the AUR, would take that problem up with Duckstation. In some cases, those were real problems with Duckstation, but in other cases, they were caused by broken packaging on the AUR, dependencies not being the version expected by the package, maybe being newer than what is expected, and things just not behaving like they should be. And add in the fact that he hasn't really been a fan of the way things are being done on Linux for quite a while now, like when a couple of years ago he disabled the Wayland support in PCSX2, and then complained about people talking about the Wayland support being broken in PCSX2. Basically, he wasn't a fan of what Wayland was doing anyway. He doesn't use Linux, and basically, he has a Linux build because it makes sense to have a Linux build, but he doesn't really care about the Linux build. And this was following an even earlier change where the license of the project was changed. So it went from a GPL v3 license, which changing to anything else from that is a bit funky, but considering Stenzek is the main developer on the project and basically everything is done by him, you can rewrite the parts that are not compatible and then basically do whatever you want. He changed to a Polyform strict license, and then from there went to the CC by NC ND 4.0, which is non-commercial, no derivatives. This is a very important license for Stenzek, because there's been cases in the past where people have taken Duckstation and then tried to sell hardware using Duckstation, or making a fork of Duckstation and then selling hardware using that, or just making a fork of Duckstation and sort of siphoning users off to the fork. And basically, he doesn't like that that's a thing that's done. This is a source-available license. At this point, Duckstation is not open source. But all of this stuff happened 6 months or even further ago. The reason why we're here now is for a recent change. Common, add additional unit tests, add fix several logical errors. Now, I assume it's named like this because he thinks people are not going to see it. But the issue is people are watching him like a hawk. People will spot any little change you do, and they are going to talk about it, because there's specific files that people know that you're going to modify, and not that one. This one here. This is the one that had the check for Arch Linux, and that check has now been removed. It's been removed because there's a new check. But here's the fun part. Now it's not just about Arch Linux. Refuse to build in hostile environments. The code and build script licenses do not allow for packages, and I'm sick of dealing with people complaining about things broken by packages and then being attacked by package maintainers who violate their distribution's code of conduct. Attempts to request removal of these packages have been unsuccessful, so we have to resort to this. Note, you do not have permission to distribute build scripts or patches that modify the build system without explicit permission from the copyright holder. Duckstation's code is public, so it can be audited and learned from, not to repackage. This is why we can't have nice things. And I understand why he's doing this. I understand not wanting packages. I understand everything going on here. This is a horrible way to check, by the way. Like, actually an insanely bad way to check. It checks for a file called etc/os release. Let's have a look at what that file is. etc/os-release. It is this one right here. Basically, it includes some metadata about what your distro is. The name of the distro, a pretty name for it, the ID, some various other things, documentation. Various applications will interact with this file. There is a standard for this somewhere. It's a file that most distros have. But it's also just a file. There is nothing checking if this file is valid. There's nothing checking if you've included certain things in here. I can just change this from Arch to Ubuntu, and the check now fails. This is not a file you should rely on having good information. Now notice with the Arch checks, it's also checking ID Arch or contains Arch. So again, you could just change it to something like Manjaro. It's fine. But it's not just checking for Arch. It's also checking for NixOS. The NixOS people are now in the line of fire as well. And not just with this check, but also Nixtop in the environment, Nixstore in the environment, and in Nixshell in the environment, or exists etc/NixOS. If any of those things are true, or this here, it's gonna fail. Now, the problem is, when you try to do things like this on NixOS, well, the whole, packaging environment on NixOS exists to deal with problems involving packaging, and we'll get to that in just a moment. Regarding Duckstation, there have also been discussions over in Nix packages, potentially deprecate or change source for Duckstation due to the license change. This is back in 2024, and this one doesn't have any new additional commentary. This one, how to deal with license compliance, also started around the same time. This one does have some more recent discussions on it as of couple of days ago and a couple of hours ago. 2 days ago, someone said, Duckstation is now actively blocking on NixOS and seems to have added an additional restriction for packaging on their license after this commit. To the best of my knowledge, this has zero legal value. Now, I'm not a lawyer, nobody in this thread is a lawyer, the Duckstation developer's not a lawyer either. No one here is a lawyer. So, anything about law, take it with a giant grain of salt. To the best of my knowledge, this has zero legal value if you're not directly distributing their files or editing them. Nothing can stop you from making a software completely separate from theirs, aka Nix, that happens to download their software directly from them and interact, install/patch with it. Even if you didn't want to patch the NixOS block, you can just unset the relevant environment variables before you build it and maybe figure out a way to provide a fake etc/OS release. That said, if I like the idea of making assholes angry, I personally believe people like this and their software do not deserve your time at all. A derivation is a recipe. Instructions. The same thing as sending a PDF on Discord on how to download a piece of software. So long as marked unfree, it is never cached, therefore never packaged. The only time it is packaged is when a user builds it themselves, and in that case, the end user is responsible for their actions. Someone else said, despite if this is legal or not, I personally think that we should respect this decision nonetheless. We can just ship the app image and mark unfree, and that's it. And this ultimately is what probably should be done, because this is not going to be the last time the Duckstation dev does something. They're going to add in some additional checks, they're going to do something else, and it's going to become a problem somewhere down the line again. I am not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that locally patching a binary can only be illegal when bypassing a license check, encryption, or digital rights management. Nothing else can be a breach of contract when explicitly forbidden by a EULA coming from the binary. This can usually lead to things like license or account termination, which don't really matter here, and for the purpose of interoperability is actually protected by law in most jurisdictions, US and EU. And more importantly, the idea is not to modify and redistribute Duckstation ourselves, but to publish a recipe that does it on the end user's computer automatically. So this is the question of, if you're distributing a build file that modifies it locally, you're not distributing a modified version. So the legality there is, again, not a lawyer, but probably fine? There's still some debate going back and forth about exactly what to do here and what's going to happen to the package, but I'm sure over time this is going to be ironed out, at least until the next change is made. Now, fixing this in Arch Linux in the most straightforward way, a little bit annoying, modifying the OS release file and doing it like that. Obviously, you don't want to just have AUR packages modifying the OS release file. So what's actually going to happen, basically, is the same thing they're already doing, which is having it be patched out on the user system. Because, again, the AUR is not patching it. They are providing you a file that patches it on your own system. You're not distributing a patched version of the application. You are distributing the application, and then locally, the user is patching it. It's a legal loophole. I'm not a lawyer, but it's probably fine. As for NixOS, where kind of the whole point of doing things is applications don't really work properly in a Nix-like environment, so things are going to be broken a lot of the time. Basically, what you do is, well, someone's already worked out how to go and temporarily modify everything so that it doesn't think it's running in Nix. And then the checks don't work. Easy fix. And this is not modifying the package at all. This is modifying your own system to make the package build correctly. No modification is being done to the application. So, at least from my not a lawyer opinion, this is probably fine as well. Here's the thing though. I don't know why this is suddenly happening. Obviously, when you have the Arch Linux stuff, this is just a modified version of the previous Arch Linux check, probably because they were still having people use the package, so he modifies the check, so then they need to, like, change things again, and then the check doesn't work, so there's less people using the package. That makes sense. But I can't find any reference to a NixOS user complaining about Duckstation. Maybe they're doing so on the Discord, possibly. Best possible guess I have is he found out that NixOS does things weirdly and that NixOS could break things, therefore preemptively blocks it to make sure it doesn't cause any problems. Because I've not seen any cases of a NixOS user complaining about the package. If you know something, if you can find something, let me know, because I would love to see it. I'll pin the comment and, you know, make sure people go and see that. Now, in case you're curious about Stenzek as a person, there are some comments from people that have worked with him quite extensively in the past who have some, relatively negative things to say about what it's like working with him, what it's like trying to sort of appease him and keep him happy. Basically, he's an incredibly talented developer, and people want him to be involved in their emulation projects. But he also sees anything that goes against what he wants as like a slight against him. So all of these projects that have wanted him to stay around basically bend over backwards, trying to do everything they possibly can to keep him happy. But eventually someone slips up, eventually someone says something or someone does something, and there's some big argument, there's some big fight. he has come back under a bunch of different names, working on a bunch of different projects that he says he's not involved in. No, I didn't do Aether SX2. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. No, that's not me. I am a different person. Everyone knows who it is, right? Everyone knows who it is. But because he is such a good developer, people have just tried to work with him for years and years. Now, I'm going to assume that eventually the Linux build is going to be removed entirely, right? I will be very surprised if it sticks around, but until that day happens, how does Stenzek expect you to actually use it on Linux? Here is the GitHub. So if we search for Linux, there is this section here. So previously, there was a Flatpak. That Flatpak has been going for a couple of years now, and if you still haven't installed, well, it's not been updated for a while, so maybe don't keep using that because you're like 3 years out of date. The main way to do it now, the only supported way, is to grab the app image. Anything else, unsupported. You're not only on your own, he actively doesn't want you to do it. As for the other option, well, there are other PS1 emulators out there. Check out the emulation wiki. Most things are just forks of Duckstation, to be honest, but there are other options out there. Duckstation and Mednafen are generally considered to be the best options out there. Sadly, PS1 isn't an area which has had tons and tons of coverage. There are emulators out there, but a lot of them are very experimental. A lot of them aren't great, so there's not many options in this space. I will be very surprised if we see Duckstation on Linux that much longer. If it happens, it happens, but I wouldn't be holding my breath on that one, so yeah. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. If you're an NixOS user, do you care about this? Do you have a workaround? Do you have a different workaround? Do you use the app image? I don't know. I'd love to know. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you like the video, go like the video, go subscribe as well. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, Patreon, subscribe, Stelly Birthday, linked down below. That's going to be it for me, and if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably Stenzek.